Should you pay your house off early or invest? This is a widely debated topic in the YouTube world, and maybe even across the dinner table with friends, family, coworkers, you name it. Trying to decide whether I should pay off my mortgage early or should I invest that money and earn more in the long run of it. How do you make sense of it? What I'd like to do in today's video is just simply run the math behind paying your mortgage off early or investing. I want to give you the parameters. I want to give you the logical steps to help you make that decision, right? So my goal here is not to persuade you in any particular direction. My goal is to just give you the foundation of which to make a clear decision for your household so that you can ultimately achieve what we're all after: financial freedom, financial independence, right? Mastery over your personal finances. So with that being said, let's take it right to the whiteboard. It's very important for you to know your four major numbers. Now for this class here, what we're gonna do is just look at cash flow. I want you to inject what your income is, what your expenses are, what your debt is. I'm gonna give you my parameters in terms of how I would go about paying my mortgage off early or investing. Certain things that I would wanna have in place before I actually start. Right? So we're going to assume a few things in this case study here with someone having about $1,500 a month in cash flow. Okay, that's net after expenses, after tithing, but not including investing or saving, because that $1,500 is what we're going to use toward paying off our mortgage early or investing. And we'll get out on this side with that. What you can do, again, you put your four major numbers here. You can get a sheet of paper, right? Or buy a whiteboard and do this for yourself so you can actually map it out. You can visually see it so you're not making a decision off of emotion or off any one of your favorite gurus like myself, other content creators, other influential people in your life that convince you a certain way. Again, my goal is not to do that. I want to give you the facts and want to empower you, right? So the next few set of numbers we want to get is the balance of your mortgage, right? What do we currently owe and how many years remain on that mortgage? In this case study, we're looking at a $400,000 property at the very beginning of that mortgage. So 30 years, the very first payment at a 5.38% with a principal and interest only payment, no escrow attached, a principal and interest only payment of $2,241.13. Okay? If all we were to do is just pay the $2,241.13, this home will be paid off in 30 years precisely. You would have paid a total of $806,807.50, right? Compared to the original loan amount of $400,000. So you would have paid an additional $406,807.50 in interest, right? Giving you that total number of 806. Now, if we look at the average appreciation on real estate, right? I compiled a couple different numbers here. If we just estimated your home value increasing over these 30 years at 3%, the value of your home would be $970,904.99. So everything that you paid in interest would show back up in equity in your property, right? So did you lose all that interest that you paid, that $2,241.13? Yes, you did, and then you got it back, right, in the form of equity. The only way to access that equity is what? Sell or borrow, right, for the most part. So if your property grew at 3%, that's the number. If it was at 4%, home would be worth nearly $1.3 million. And we just need it to appreciate by at least 2.5% to recover all the money you would have paid if you just made the regular mortgage payment, okay? One thing that we're not including in here that could throw all these numbers off, okay? And this is me injecting an opinion now, right? Again, this is not to persuade you, but also giving you my perspective at the same time. So I'm going to inject an opinion here, okay? My opinion is If you were the person that decided to not pay your mortgage off early, and you are the vast majority of Americans watching this YouTube channel on typically fixed income with low increases of income, right? You have a job or career and your income only increases by so much year by year, and we're, on a fixed living expense. We try to steward and manage. One of the things that would throw this off is when your homeowner's insurance and your property taxes increase year by year. And if your homeowner's insurance and property taxes increases more than your income does in that year, you're going to have less cash flow, okay, which would throw off all the numbers in terms of you deciding not to pay your mortgage off early and invest. So if you were to take that $1,500 a month example here and invest it, right, and that's all we have, $1,500 every single month, that's going to be our commitment, but your cost of living increases, that decreases your cash flow if your income did not increase by the amount that your cost of living went up by. So if your homeowner's insurance went up by $1,000 and your property taxes went up by $1,000, it's $2,000 for the whole year. We would need to have our income increase more than that on a net basis after taxes so that you can continue to invest at $1,500 a month, okay? So that is something that never gets talked about when you are watching content on why you should pay your home, why you shouldn't pay your mortgage off early and just invest. And so they'll give you the graph and they'll show how much money you have, right? Millions of dollars, whatever the case may be, and the mortgage being paid off over a 30-year span, but not factoring in cost of living going up faster than wages, which the vast majority of Americans experience on a day-to-day basis. And on top of the complexity of investing and trying to net a higher rate of return than the cost of your mortgage is not exactly the easiest thing in the world to do, okay? Again, that was an opinion. Now, coming back to just facts, collecting your data, 4 major numbers, how much you owe on your mortgage, the interest rate, the payment, just look at principal and interest, okay, 30-year time frame, or however many years left you have on it. Look at what the total amount you would be paying, so what's at stake, basically, and then also take into account the appreciation of your home going up. This is going to be a argument for why you shouldn't pay your mortgage off, because when you look at a 30-year time frame, the appreciation of that property would offset all that you would have paid in interest. It's a very healthy argument, no doubt about it. So now we're going to come over here to the right side of the board and look at making simply an extra payment versus investing, okay? And then I'm going to give you some investment parameters that you should consider as a foundational base to help offset the mortgage, right, to have more wealth over that 30-year time frame than if you would have paid your mortgage off early, then invested later, okay? So if we were to just make extra payments, right, you can run this math on an amortization calculator you just Google it, amortization calculator, put 400,000, 5.38%, it should spit out that number, 30 years, and then you can find the mortgage calculators where you can inject extra payments, put $1,500, you should get the exact same numbers I have. And it'll tell you that if you made extra payments of $1,500 a month religiously, consistently, you'll pay your mortgage off in 12 years and 2 months, okay? So instead of paying $806,807, right, and 50 cents, you would have paid a total of $545,858.63. Total interest you would have paid is $145,858.63. So that is a tremendous savings no matter what, comparing someone just making mortgage payments, not investing, just making mortgage payments, compared to someone that says, I want to pay off my home early. And when you pay off your home early, what does that do? You get access to cash flow on a guaranteed basis. So one of the arguments for paying off your mortgage early that you'll hear other content creators and even like myself in this example here would say, hey, you have a guarantee here. If you pay off your mortgage early, you're guaranteed a certain amount of cash flow when it's all said and done, right? So 12 years and 2 months from now, you're guaranteed to recover $22.41 and 13 cents. That would give you a total cash flow of $3,741 and some cents. Okay, so what we could look at now, I'll share my screen here, and we can look at what the value of the home would be 12 years from now, right? Compared to what you've paid. And did you recover that in equity, right? Let's take a look, right? Using the same exact numbers provided with just making mortgage payments all the way to 30 years out. So as you can see, initial mortgage, $400,000. Obviously, we're not contributing anything. This is just looking at the value of a property. If it grew by just 2.5% on average, your property appreciated by 2.5%, the value of the home would be $537,000, almost $538,000, very close to the $545,000. So all I really need to do, right? All I really need to have is my home appreciate by at least a little over 2.5%. If we look at 3%, the value of the home is now roughly $570,000. So did you lose your cash flow by paying off your mortgage early? The answer is yes, same way as if you would have not paid your mortgage off early. You lose that money, right? But then you got it back in the form of equity. So we can make a healthy argument just looking at both sides, whether you decide to not pay your mortgage off early or pay your mortgage off early with the amount of cash flow of, say, $1,500, that in that time frame, either time frame, we can make a safe argument, conservative argument, that as long as the property appreciates a little over 2.5% every single year, I'll recapture whatever I put or whatever I did not put into the home. So now we're on even playing field at this point. Do you see that? We're even right now. Whether you decide to do it or not, even playing field. So there's now we get to look at, okay, what are some factors that tip the scales in either direction, right? So now let's look at investing, okay? We've got our parameters so far of not paying off your mortgage at all and or paying off your mortgage early, what those results would produce. Now we're going to look at investing $1,500 a month, right? And I want to give you some parameters. If you decide, you come to the conclusion based on this video and other videos and other content and other conversations, Denzel, I'm going to invest over paying off my mortgage early. Let's map out what those results would look like. And here are some opinions now that I'm going to give you if you decided to invest over paying off your mortgage earlier. Here's what I would do in terms of my investment parameters. So we're going to need to have some kind of liquidity, preferably, in terms of what we invest in, right? And what is the intent once you get to a certain place. So you have two options if you decide to invest first over paying off your mortgage early. You have two routes you can go. You can either say, I'm going to invest with the intent to pay off the home early, and I'll do it in the same amount of time it would have taken me to make extra payments. That's a very strong argument as to why you would invest over paying off your mortgage early. So that's one route, which is in those same 12 years and 2 months, can I produce enough wealth to pay the mortgage off in one shot? Let's take a look at what the balance of your property would be at if all you did was make the normal mortgage payment. So we're going to look at 12 years and 2 months. And that's going to build your, your goal, your end game. Like, okay, I have to get to here. My investment needs to perform this much by this time frame to beat 12 years and 2 months, right? So ideally you want to have your home paid off in 12 years and 1 month, right? Or sooner, whatever the case may be, right? But if we're just looking at equal, right? So let me share my screen again. Same parameters. So we're going to scroll all the way to year 12 and 2 months, and we can see here that the balance, should be able to see that, we owe $307,960.33. I'm gonna write that on the whiteboard real quick. All right, so 12 years, 2 months in, doing nothing but just making the regular mortgage payment, and I took my $1,500 and invested it, I need that money to be way above $307,960.37, right? In order to accomplish paying off the home early. Because ideally, whatever it is that you're gonna invest in, there needs to be some kind of liquidity. So what we don't wanna do is have our money go inside of a Roth IRA or any kind of qualified retirement account that I can't pull from till 59 and a half. If your intent is still to pay the home off early, you're just going to do so by investing first, then liquidating, paying the home off in full. What you have to account for is inflation, taxes, right? Fees, cost to invest, losses, average rate of return, to help make an ideal analysis based off certain parameters to help you make the decision whether that makes sense for you to do it or not, okay? So in an ideal world, since we know we have our facts, our foundation is in 12 years and 2 months, by not making any extra payments, just the $2,241.13, I'll owe $307,960.37. So now we need to look at, okay, how much does my money need to grow by each and every month during the first 12 years, right? What does the money need to increase by to pay off the home in full? And you also have to account for when you liquidate, that's going to be a taxable event, right? Now, ideally, since you're investing for the long term, you're paying long-term capital gains tax, which is way less than short-term capital gains. Nonetheless, you still have to factor in taxes, you still have to factor in fees, potential losses, all that stuff, okay? So now let me share my screen once more and show you what it would look like if we were to invest $1,500 a month, right? And the money would have to grow on average every single year at 8.38%. This 8.38% is assuming you never lost any money during those 12 years. That's very, very hard to do, right? So when you factor that in, that's going to help you say, okay, I need to make way more than 5.38%, way more than 8.38% to safely say that I can liquidate from that account in one shot to pay off my home in full, right? So at 8.38%, your investment account would be at around $366,547.74. But again, you have to minus fees, you have to minus taxes, you'll probably be way less than 307, right? What remains to pay that home off. So I would make an argument that we need to earn double to triple what the rate of the mortgage is to have that property paid off efficiently, right? So that would just be my argument there, because we need to factor in losses and taxes. So if we look at like 16%, that's $603,838.43, right? And the reason why like it needs to be that high, again, over a 12-year time frame, for the vast majority of Americans that have no idea how to invest, there's going to be a learning curve, right? There's going to be periods in those 12 years where you have a very, very high chance of losing money, especially if you are going to be a passive investor. So there's going to be some parameters here. Here I go again, injecting some opinions that for the investor, for the person that wants to invest, I would say you need to do it actively because you're passively paying your mortgage. That's passive, it's just an automated payment. So we need to put our time, energy, and focus on investing, where you actually need to build out the investment strategy, right? We need to build out the timeline, the plan, the education, right? To reduce losses, to account for taxes that are going to be owed, and to account for fees, right? So when you minus all that, again, the intent was pay the home off. You don't want to put those things into perspective. So that's why I make the argument of you're going to need to earn a much higher rate of return to catch up and have plenty of money to wipe out the mortgage, enough to do so, right? Because in those 12 years, what else are we not accounting for? Aside from taxes and inflation and fees in your investment account or accounts, what else are we not including? Well, Denzel, what happens when life happens, okay? So when life happens, someone passes away, someone gets sick, emergency, cost of living goes up, this, that, that can cause you to need to drain, right, liquidate your investment account to cover a certain expense. Now, the same would occur for the person that's paying off their home early, right? The same would occur. They would have to now pull from somewhere to liquidate. So you can make a strong argument that the person that decided to not pay off their home early would have more liquidity in the event life happens, where they're investing and they have to pull 5K from that investment to handle this emergency, versus the person that's sending all their cash flow into their mortgage. There's no liquidity, right? I can't re-access that money unless I borrow, right? So that person that is trying to pay off their home early needs to have another plan in place, such as an emergency fund, some sort of savings vehicle, some sort of liquidity outside of the $1,500 a month that would protect that person when life does happen. Okay, so it happens for both. Now, to move along with investment parameters here, the brokerage account or real estate investing or starting a business would be the only three areas that would make sense to me, where I would maintain a level of liquidity, right, that produces not just wealth, like an increase in account value, but also cash flow and possibly more income. So if I do a brokerage account and I invest in stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and have a standard asset allocation, all you're getting in that is just the account value growing. There's no cash flow being produced from that on top of the account value growing. So that's going to be the third, the last thing that I would do personally. In real estate, it takes time to actually do it. So you would have to essentially like build $1,500 a month, save it up, right? You're either going to leverage debt or just save up money to figure out what your real estate investment strategy is. And the nice part about going the real estate investing route is you get value, portfolio value, right? Properties increase, you get tax benefits, and you get cash flow. So you can actually increase cash flow to the 15 over that 12-year time frame. And that would be a much stronger argument for investing over paying off your mortgage early, because if you pay off your mortgage early, all you get is the cash flow, right? But you don't get additional value add other than whatever the equity would be in the property. But again, that's even playing field, because you would get the same thing over here, right? If I was investing in real estate, I'm going to get the same value add if I can pay it off in the same time frame, 12 years, 2 months, okay? That's going to be my second approach. right? That'd be my second thing that I would consider doing. And my first would be business. Actually starting a business where you get the valuation of your business increasing, so you get the wealth value of that. You get the income increase potential and cash flow by having a business, right? And you get the tax benefits that come along with having a business, which could result in having obviously more money to send right back to the payoff of the home, which would get the home paid off much sooner, okay? So in addition to deciding to invest over paying off your mortgage early, I would personally put a plan of saving 10 to 20% of cash flow per month, $150 to $300, and purchase life insurance, right? Which could operate as an emergency fund. So if you buy a high cash value life insurance policy, such as a whole life, that's properly designed, properly structured, right? That could be a vehicle that can protect the investment strategy. And the same could be said for the person that's trying to pay off their mortgage early, that you could take a portion of the cash flow, which would extend your debt-free date, right? Same over here, it would extend the amount of time, so that's even playing field. So that's just a parameter that would inject on both sides, not just one. That'd be both, right? So that you're wrapping and protecting what you're doing, right? By having life insurance, you don't necessarily have to have a safe sort of conservative growth in whatever your investment strategy is. You can just 100% invest in what you want to do, right? So if you're sending 80, 90% toward an investment strategy that has risk, you can just take on the full risk of that of 80, 90% rather than buying, say, a bond or a CD or having a high yield savings to sort of balance the portfolio. Your money would go further by purchasing a life insurance contract, a permanent life insurance contract, such as a whole life that's properly structured and properly designed for high cash value, right? And long-term growth on the death benefit and the cash value. You get the tax-free guaranteed growth use, right? It's tax deferred, but when used properly, it can be tax-free in terms of how you use the cash value. And the growth of it will outperform CDs, bonds, money market, high yield savings over a long period of time, 10 plus years, right? And it simultaneously, you remain liquid. You get the death benefit, you likely get a death benefit amount that can cover the balance of the mortgage the whole way through. So that allows this investor, this new investor, to become a sophisticated investor and focus fully on what the strategy is and go all in on that. So if it were me, I would decide a business opportunity that I can involve myself in with the $1,500 a month, because it can solve for two things. It can actually replace whatever my income is over that 10, 12-year period, right? Compared to making extra payments. And it creates the value, the wealth accumulation of it, where I can still have the intent of paying off the home much sooner rather than later, okay? So that was investing with the intent to pay your home off early. I would go with either a regular brokerage account, do real estate investing, start a business according to my values, my purpose in life. Okay. Now let's look at what it would look like if you invested just for 30 years, for the long term. Would you end up with more wealth than the person that pays off their mortgage early, then invest later, right? Who wins in that argument? Okay. So if you were to invest for 30 years straight, contributing $1,500 a month religiously, consistently, and all you earned was exactly what the interest rate is on your property, 5.38%, and you would end up with roughly $1,315,363.34. This is not subtracting taxes, fees, right? Different things that would decrease the value of that 1.3 million. So it's 1.3 million before taxes, fees, costs, all that, right? So in 30 years, the person that decided not to pay off their mortgage and just simply invest for 30 years and let their mortgage be paid off over that 30-year period, the value of their home would be anywhere from $970,000, anywhere from 1.3 million to 839,000, right? So they would have recaptured all they spent over those 30 years by just having their mortgage appreciate. And then they would have an additional $1.3 million in some sort of investment account that would be more than likely liquid to them and available to be used as, say, like an income stream, right? So if someone started at 30 years old, 30 years later, they're 60 years old, their home is paid off at 60, they get a guaranteed cash flow gain, $2,241.13, which is probably nothing after inflation kind of eats all that up, but still, you get the cash flow increase. And they have a $1.3 million account. At 6.38, right, 1.5, or 7.38, 1.8, 8.38, 2.286, okay? So the more we average, obviously, the higher that number goes. Now, let's compare that to the person that says, I'm gonna pay my mortgage off early, then I'm gonna invest. What will the total value end up looking like in that regard? So if I take the $1,500 a month initially, 12 years and 2 months, the home's paid off, my cash flow goes to $3,741 and some change. If we invested $3,741 and earned 5.38 on average for 18 years, I'll have $1.35 million over that last 18 of 30 years, right? So I have the same value of my home as the person that invested 30 years, and I have 1.35 million, $206,096. The person that invested for 30 years at 5.38% has 1.315. So this person wins, the person that paid their mortgage off early and invested, but not by much. Okay. Now, where it starts to change is if we are earning a higher rate of return, because the person that invested for 30 years and earned a higher rate of return, their money is going to be bigger, right? It's going to have a larger number. So as you can see, at 6.38% for 30 years versus 6.38% for 18 years, but with more cash flow, right? They end up with 1.49 million. Not that far behind, honestly, right? But still, the winner is the person that invested, right? And just let their mortgage get paid off and then recover all that in the form of appreciation through equity, right? At 7.38, 1.6, 1.8, and that's where it really takes off, right? At 8.38 is 2.2 over here versus 1.8. So basically, the better the investment strategy, the more confidence that person has that I'm going to invest over the next 30 years and produce a higher rate of return than, say, 6.38%, because it really starts to take off at 7.38 and higher. I really wouldn't declare it a win just because the number's higher. 1.49 to 1.575, that's not a huge difference. I declare a victory when we can see a substantial gap. And we start to see that at 8.38%. 1.8 compared to 2.2, it's an extra almost 400 grand, right? 400,000 plus, right? Of a gap. That's quite large. Not too many Americans, the average American doesn't have that when they reach retirement anyway. So that for me is a more bigger declared victory for the person that invests over paying off their mortgage early. Now, here's where I can throw in an opinion, a little bit of a caveat, is we're only comparing one debt elimination strategy, right? Which was extra payments. What if this person decided to do velocity banking in conjunction with making extra payments? What would the results be there? So I ran a little bit of math here and determined that all I have to do to have the cash flow match or do better in that last 18 years to beat the person that's been investing for 30, right? Because remember, they don't get cash flow increase until year 30. Person that pays off their mortgage early gets a cash flow increase at 12 years and 2 months, right? If I decided to pay off my house sooner, all I need to do is decrease that 12 years and 2 months to about 9 to 10 years without increasing cash flow, right? Because if you increase cash flow on one end, you have to do it for the other person so that it's still apples to apples. So the debt elimination strategy is where I get to have an upper hand without manipulating cash flow. Right? I can keep cash flow the same, yet still get out of debt sooner. How? Well, it's a matter of how those $1,500 a month, how cash flow is being applied to the pay down of the home. You see, if I can acquire a line of credit and do the velocity banking concept for the first couple of years, say like the first two to 3 years, just that alone, and inject credit card use, right? Running bills through a credit card, reducing my actual cost of living by getting cashback rewards, right? That can be applied toward the balance, which means technically more cash flow each and every month for that same 12-year period. And then doing velocity banking by making chunk payments rather than extra payments. And again, just doing velocity banking for just a couple years in the beginning and then turning off velocity banking and then just doing extra payments the rest of the way through. Depending on what my rate is on my debt tool, if I can get a home equity line of credit or personal line of credit in conjunction with a credit card, we could make a strong argument of reducing that 12-year and 2-month timeline down to about 9 or 10 years, right? And maybe even sooner than that. And if that's the case, if I can just pay the mortgage off 2 years sooner than extra payments, then I'll win long term in regards to now having the cash flow sooner and investing and earning the same amount of interest compared to the person that decided to not pay their mortgage off and just invest, right? So let's take a look at what those results would look like. All right, so we're going to plug in those numbers together. Share my screen here. So if I do, instead of 12 years of growth, we'll go with 14 years of growth. I'll use the 5.38% number, and then we're going to use the 3741, and then doing that every single month, contributing. Let's see where that produces us. Oh, so I messed up. It's 20 years of growth, right? Look at that. So if I can pay the home off in 10 years, right, then start to invest at the same interest rate that the investor is getting, 5.38%. Now I'm at 1.593. So let me write that down. 1.593, $848.48. That's 10 years, paid off 20 years of growth. Okay, at 19, that's 1.46. It on the 5.38, it already won initially, right? So if we look at 20 years and then let's do 6.38. At 6.38, that's now more money, right? So 1.78384.59. That's at 6.38, and that's 20 years of growth. Okay. Then we do 7.38 is 1.998. That is a victory over the investor, right? 1.998. 165.20 cents. That's 7.38. And then at 8.38 is 2.242, and that's a loss, right? That's a loss. But if I paid off the home in 9 years, 21 years of growth, that's a victory. Not by much, right? But the numbers are very, very close compared to someone that just simply pays off their home sooner rather than later. So if we look over here, I wrote down the numbers, paying off the home in 10 years, 20 years of growth, 1.593 compared to what? 1.315. That's a significant difference on the lower interest rate, right? So remember, when the interest rate is lower, the person that's paying off their mortgage off early and then investing, they have more cash flow now. They can catch up, right? With 18 to 20 years left, they can catch up to that 30-year timeline. As the interest rate increases, because this person had been already investing for 30 years, compound interest is really working for them in their favor compared to the person that only has 18 years of compounding, right? So that's why compound interest is almost magical in this sense, because you're like, how is that possible that we're winning in the beginning and then we kind of lose as the rate goes up? Well, that's why compound interest, right? But as you can see, as long as I can get the home paid off without increasing cash flow, just simply improving the debt elimination strategy, because all it is a game of who pays less interest. That's the game that we're playing. Who pays less interest on the mortgage being paid off, and then how are we earning interest over here once we have the cash flow? And whoever has more cash flow typically wins. In this example, the person that pays off their mortgage early technically now has more cash flow, but do they have enough of a time frame to beat the investor that's just investing $1,500 a month? As long as they pay off the home in 9 or 10 years, for the most part, we're winning on all numbers, right? When it gets to 8.38, right, we did not win on a 20-year time frame of growth, but a 21-year time frame of growth, 8.38%, you really have a nice victory here that you can celebrate. 2,477,000 compared to 2.2 million, 86,000. Right? That's 8.38%. That's 21 years of compounding versus 30 years of compounding at $1,500 a month. This is 21 years of compounding at $3,741. So whether you decide to pay off your mortgage early or invest, are we going to get results? Absolutely. Better than the person that does nothing. And that is the main thing here, is that hopefully, my hope is that you do something, because a plan is better than no plan. Let's just make that argument there. A plan, even if it's a poor plan, is better than no plan. So if I can get, along with other content creators and other influencers in the finance space, if we can all come together and get the vast majority of Americans to do something, whether it's invest first for the long term or pay your mortgage off in the short term, then invest later, both are going to get much better results than if they did absolutely nothing with their $1,500 a month in cash flow. Now, when we start to get a little more sophisticated, for those that are watching, that are putting time into this and energy and effort and education, you're more of a sophisticated individual with more financial literacy and education under your belt. Based on these numbers here and these different parameters, it can change. But my takeaway from this is that the person that decides to pay off their mortgage early, then invests later, their result is equal or slightly lower, but similar to the results of the person that decides to invest for 30 years and not pay off their mortgage. That does not to pay their mortgage off sooner, right? So the investor that intends not to pay the mortgage off sooner, just go 30 years, that result, very similar to the person that says, I'm going to pay off my home sooner rather than later, and I'm going to invest, and I'm going to end up with just around the same amount of money as that investor, if not more or slightly less, but not a huge gap. And it does depend on the time frame, right? Because we did see that, okay, 12 years, the investor, blew us out the park, right? By about 400 grand, right? They were earning on average 8.38, paid off the home in 12 years, you got 1.8 million compared to 2.2. Definitely blew us out the water, right? But if I pay my home off in 9 or 10 years, right? 9 years, 2.4 compared to 2.2, right? Not that much of a gap compared to the other one, right? But again, for me, it's like, now we have to inject the user the person. That's where this changes, because this all looks nice and pretty on the whiteboard, but when you actually give this to an individual, if I were to give this investment strategy to a single mom of 4, right, where her stress levels increase on a daily basis with just looking at the mortgage payment and how much interest she pays each and every month. There's a lot to be said when we now inject the person. So I would now make an opinion and an argument that the vast majority of Americans, would be better off developing a plan to pay your mortgage off sooner rather than later. Can make a strong argument there because of the user, the lack of knowledge, the lack of financial literacy and education, that initially out the gate, we can make a strong argument for paying off your mortgage sooner, becoming debt-free completely, right? Then investing with the intent to create more cash flow, more wealth, more financial freedom and independence, right? That's for vast majority of Americans, ages as young as however young you can be to buy a home, right? So say 18 all the way to like 50, right? I'd say the vast majority of that age group, 18 to 50, would be way better off paying off your mortgage sooner rather than later. Then we can talk about leverage, say leveraging the property, leveraging the cash flow to invest and sort of catch up to the person that remains in debt and invests. Okay. There are cases where it absolutely makes sense to not pay your mortgage off sooner rather than later, right? So there are some strong arguments for maybe someone that is called to start a business. They have a purpose in servant leadership of some capacity, right? That involves business, that involves needing capital and resources, that you can say, okay, I still intend to pay my mortgage off sooner than later, right? I still intend to pay that mortgage off sooner than later, but I'm going to create wealth over here and create cash flow and increase income, right? Use that cash flow, write a big check in one shot a month or a day before the normal timeline of just making extra payments. You can make a strong argument for that person. I think those kinds of people are people that are watching this video and others that are, you're entrepreneur minded, business minded, you have a sophisticated level of financial education and literacy, you know how to run your numbers, you have discipline, you have good stewardship. We can make a good argument there for you to not pay your mortgage off sooner rather than later. Where we can make a extremely strong argument for paying off your mortgage sooner rather than later is when I'm talking to people that are not entrepreneur minded, that's not what they're called to be a boss, a CEO, co-founder of a company. That you're just not called to that, and that's okay. And you are on a career where you've got fixed income, steady income increases over time, right? And you're on a steady cost of living for the most part. You save money, you give, you invest. And let's say your age is 50 and up. Oh, we can make a very strong argument as to why you should pay your mortgage off sooner rather than later if we're trying to retire by age 60, 62, 65, 59, 64, 67, right? That, okay, yeah, if we can draw out a plan and you're 50 years old, and by paying off this mortgage, we're gonna get a guarantee of an increase of $3,000 a month back into your economy if we can pay the house off in about 9 years or less. So when you get to age 59, you'll be debt-free. You'll have an increase of cash flow to $3,000. Inflation takes a long time to wipe out all that $3,000, right? It takes a little bit longer to kind of wipe out that gain where you actually feel like you have more cash flow to work with and just go to other cost of living expenses. That we can then take that $3,000 plus the cash flow you already had, put that in investing for a couple more years, and say you're going to retire at 62, 63, 64, whatever it is, that you essentially removed certain key risks like debt, right? You removed 30% of your cost of living, 40% of your cost of living in about a 7 to 9 year time frame, and you're 50 years old, and now we're 57 or 59 or almost 60, and you're only a couple years out from retirement. You've got 401k, you got Social Security, you got some savings, you got a paid off home worth 4, 5, 6, 700 plus $1,000. Maybe we go get a home equity line of credit and leverage credit cards, home equity line of credit, savings and emergency funds. That puts the vast majority of Americans that are at that age group in a much better financial position than others. So with that being said, I hope this was very helpful to you. God bless you. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll be talking soon. Bye now.